also, my mother's yahrzeit yesterday, and that's for the Shoshana Bat Chana. It's on the program.
Shoshana Bat Chana, Leilu Nishmata. Do I have a green light to start? All right. So, and just one question: Did you make me co so I can share?
Yes.
Share sheets. Okay. Thank you so much. So I'll tell you what we're going to talk today about. Bezat Hashem. We have met 2 weeks ago. In a different time though, in the first slot, but we met and I spoke about Pikuach Nefesh on the national level. That was the topic. And of course it was directly related to our situation of Corona. So along that lines, initially I thought to give, because I wanted to give something that has to do with the things that we're coping with now, I thought to give a share about porch minyanim, whether they work or not, halachically. But then I regretted, and I'll tell you what we're talking about and why. I'm talking about the topic of Mila, bris Mila, at the time of Corona. That's the topic. Now, the reason I picked up this topic is, first of all, it has to do with the Parsha. Lech Lecha, the end of Parshat Lech Lecha, that was last Shabbat. The end of Parshat Lech Lecha was about the bris. Avraham, actually, as Rabbi Melamed points out in his book, Pninei Halacha, Rabbi Melamed, Eliezer Melamed points out that it's the first mitzvah that a Jew was commanded as a private Jew. It is true that Avraham was told Lech Lecha, Ma'artzecha U'Mimolatcha, but he sees that as a more national statement. The Mila is mamash a mitzvah, and it was also coined as a mitzvah, that the first mitzvah that a Jew was commanded. So that gives it a special significance. And indeed, Jews were really moiser they nefesh. They were Jews, even though it's not one of the three averos, Jews were really taking care to do this mitzvah even under very, very hard circumstances. Okay? And this is also in the background of the question of Mila at the time of the Corona. It's not that it tells automatically what is the answer. I'm just saying the background is that it's an extremely significant mitzvah, and that it's one of the two positive commandments. One of the two positive commandments, the only two positive commandments, that if you miss them, there is a kares. It's Mila and Pesach. It's an extremely significant mitzvah, and it was, and Jews throughout generations were really doing a lot of efforts, heroic efforts, to perform this mitzvah of Mila. So I said, I thought about it because it's at the end of the previous week's Parsha, and actually the beginning of this week's Parsha is the Bikur Cholim that Hashem does when Avraham was recovering from the Mila. So it's mamish, so it's a perfect time to give such a shir in the week between Thursday. Another reason that I just thought about today is that you'll see that there is a big vikuach, a big dispute regarding one of the aspects of the Mila, whether it is dangerous or not. And there is a big dispute, and people are saying one thing and people are saying the opposite thing, and l'chora they're even arguing about facts, which gave me the idea of post-truth, and everyone will think, what's the link to yesterday and today regarding the question of truth and fake news and post-truth and whatever about our era. So that was another association I got. But let's now start the discussion. So I'll tell you how I got to the discussion initially. About, pretty early after the corona, after we were all in a lockdown, around Pesach time, I believe. A Talmud Chacham that lives in my neighborhood, that made Aliyah from America. He's even a rabbi. And his father is a very known doctor in New York that gave during that time also advice to, Rabbi Willig, Rabbi Schechter. I don't remember, but really he's in those circles. His father is himself a Talmud Chacham, and he's a doctor and a respected doctor. And he sent me, I think it was right after Pesach, actually. He sent me a recorded WhatsApp. My neighbor, this rabbi that his father is a doctor that lives in my neighborhood, that his father is strongly against doing Mila now. Is strongly against. He thinks it's too dangerous. You don't know whether the Moel has corona, whether the father has corona, and therefore he is very concerned about it. And therefore, his father was talking with the rabbis that he thinks it's not responsible to do Mila now. And when I checked it out, I saw that the rabbis, first of all, it was a different time. We knew less about the corona, and by the way, just an anecdote. Baruch Hashem, this own person that sent me that recorded message, he had a baby several months later in December. And there was a bris, and it was on time, and it was on Shabbos. Okay, what shows you that he himself, and of course it was after consultation with his father, meaning his father himself changed his mind. By the way, not necessarily changed his mind. Maybe the times changed and the situation changed and the control was better. His father spoke about the situation in New York a week after Pesach. If you remember, it was a terrible situation then in New York a week after Pesach. At any rate, when he spoke with me about it and brought it to my attention, I started looking it up, and I saw that the chief rabbinate of Israel was very clear about, on the one hand, giving very clear instructions and how to be careful about the Mila how to be careful about the Mila. Excuse me, I'll just turn it off. How to be careful about the Mila on Corona times. But on the other hand, claiming strongly, and it was supported by doctors, that there is no reason to postpone bris Mila now. So that was now if we'll think, what are the risks that could be involved in Mila? So I already mentioned, people are, let's say at least 3 people are are not keeping social distance. Okay, we'll say it this way. That's the father, the baby, and the Moel. I assume, let's say that the father is the sandak. Let's say we want to minimize the people around. Okay, let's say. So the people that will be in distance without distance is the Moel and the father. Actually, the baby anyhow will not have distance, because an hour after the bris or a week after the bris, the father will not keep social distance from the baby. Yeah, of course. So I'm talking about the Moel and the father. So that's one risk. What other What other risks could be involved? I'm asking you now. Think about it in Mila at the time of Corona.
Mitzitza.
Right. So so I'll get to the Mitzitza in a second. And actually the majority of our class will relate to that because that seems to be the highest risk. But even beforehand, just, it's definitely a procedure. Okay. Even before the Mitzitza, it's a procedure. The
handling the baby.
Places are exposed. It's a chirurgic procedure. And let's say people are saying blessings, people are drinking wine, meaning there are no masks and the distance is not a distance. So this could be a problem. And of course, what seems to be the highest risk, as was mentioned, is the practice of Mitzitza, which is that part of the process of the Mila is that the Moel is sucking Mitzitza. The literal translation of Mitzitza is to suck. There is a practice of sucking the blood. And of course, if you do it with your mouth, the virus is going with rock, saliva, however you call it. So that seems to be a very direct risk of if the Moel Chas v'Shalom has COVID, it will. That's the best way to make the baby with COVID, and then the parent, and you understand, and then the chain continues. So these are the issues at stake. Now, first, I'll start with a certain very, very quick background, and then we will explore really what are the considerations here and what could be done. So let's start first, as I said, general about the Mila. I said some general statements, but let's read some others. I said it's a very important mitzvah, has kares, Jewish identity, first mitzvah that a Jew was commanded as a private Jew. The Gemara in Shabbos, as you know, the 21st chapter in Masechet Shabbos is all dedicated for Bris Mila, Perak Rabbi Eliezer de Mila, Perak Kafalef in Masechet Shabbat. And it says here the following: Kol mitzvah shekiblu alehem besimcha, the Gemara says, Kol mitzvah shekiblu alehem besimcha kegon Mila, עדיין עושים אותה בשמחה. וכל מצווה שמסרו ישראל עצמה לנהן למיטה בשעת גזמורת מלכות כגון מילה, עדיין היא מוחזקת בידם. Every mitzvah that the people of Israel were doing Mesiras Nefesh were willing to die in order to do it. When there was a Gzera, of course, it's not very important to point out. Pikuach Nefesh is Doche Mila. We'll see it. It's not one of the three Averas. Yeah, Pikuach Nefesh is Doche Mila. We can prove that easily. Have you ever been in a bris that was postponed from the 8th day? I assume all of you have. Well, at least my firstborn, his Mila was not at the 8th day. He was yellow. And Tzahevet. And that is because Pikuach Nefesh does not override Mila. Only Avodah Zarah, Gilui Arayos, and Shfichus Damim override Pikuach Nefesh. But Mila is part of all the mitzvot that we spoke about 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, I gave you a shir about Pikuach Nefesh. We spoke about the national level, but the first layer was the private level. There is an explicit verse in the Torah that says "Vachai bahem," and you should live via the mitzvot. And our sages infer "Vachai bahem velo sheyamut bahem," meaning that a mitzvah, as we clarified 2 weeks ago, that the Tosfos in Yoma says that "Vachai bahem" means that even a suffix pikuach nefesh. The Gemara already says that, but he clarifies that we don't want any scenario that a mitzvah will cause a life risk. Yeah, it is. That's not the will of Hashem. And even a suffix pikuach nefesh overrides the mitzvah. Now, this is true regarding Mila too. And yet still we see that Jews were moser than nefesh. Let's say the Goyim didn't allow. The reason is the following. The halachic reason is the following, is that it was Gzeiras HaMalchut. We know that in the laws of Mesiras Nefesh, only three mitzvos, three negative commandments, only three negative commandments of Avodah Zarah, Gilui Arayos, and Shfichus Damim. Only for these three you override. You are giving your life. Your pikuach nefesh doesn't override them, but also every commandment. If there are goyim that are in principle want to uproot the Jews from this mitzvah, and it's done out of an ideological thing that we want to uproot you from this mitzvah, okay, then you should be moser your nefesh on it. And that is why, after I gave this short background, here. So again, I'm reading the text from the Gemara in Shabbos. Every mitzvah that the Jews accepted upon themselves happily, like Mila, they were still doing it b'simcha. And every mitzvah that they were moser their nefesh to die in order to perform it. And when did they do it? Of course, Bishat Gzerat HaMalchut, when the Gentiles made a decree to uproot the Milah. So we were even willing to die and do it. So every mitzvah, and since historically that was done regarding Milah, we know the Greeks, that was one of the three things that they decreed not to do, and the Jews were moser than nefesh, willing to die for it. So since that was done, they still hold on to it. So we see here, I just gave it as a general statement to show the significance of this milah, that Jews are not giving up this mitzvah so easily. In the Shulchan Aruch, there's a siman, a chapter in Yoreh De'ah that has only one seif, one statement, and that is the statement, Mitzvat aseh la'av lamulad no. It's a positive commandment for the father to circumcise, to make milah to his son. And look at this statement. Ugdola mitzvah zo mish'ar mitzvot aseh. Look at what is statement. And this mitzvah is bigger than all the rest of positive commandments. You agree with me that there are a lot of important positive commandments in the Torah. Eating matzah. I don't know. There are a lot of important wearing tefillin. A lot of important positive commandments in our Torah, and still the Shulchan Aruch says, Ugdola mitzvah zo mish'ar mitzvot aseh. So since this is a mitzvah that is greater than any mitzvah aseh, and since this mitzvah, Jews throughout history were, when the Gentiles wanted to uproot this mitzvah, they were willing to die in order to perform it. So clearly, it's not a mitzvah that we would give up easily. And yet still, if it's pikuach nefesh and it's not a decree of the Gentiles, well, Corona, you'll have to agree with me that Corona is not a decree of the Malchus. Corona is a situation. And furthermore, we have a precedence. We know, Chaverim, you know what, I'll ask the crowd here, because I see I'm speaking too much, and then I'm not sure whether people are with me or not. So here I'll be like a good teacher, which I'm not always, and I'll just ask the crowd, what is the precedence of pushing, aside from what I said, like a public even precedence, of pushing away the mitzvah of milah because of pikuach nefesh, and doing it not only on the private level. We all of us know that there are many babies, like my firstborn, that the milah was pushed off because of pikuach nefesh. Okay, this is very, one second. This is one second. This is a very frequent thing. But I'm asking, when did we have something public that all the Jews, because of an objective sakana, pushed away the Mila? Yes.
Right. Midbar.
What? Please.
Bamidbar.
Right. Right, Mitch and Marcel, both of you are saying an explicit answer. It's an answer that appears in our sources, in the sages, that for 38 years, approximately, there were no Jews circumcised, even though it was a positive commandment, a valid positive commandment. The conception was that medically, it was dangerous to do Milah in the desert of Sinai. There was what the Gemara calls ruach tzfonit, a northern wind. Again, we don't understand exactly what they're talking about, but for us, it's not relevant. According to the medical understanding of the Jews, and by the way, they had a big Rebbe, a big Poisek that time, Moshe Rabbeinu. I don't think there was ever a greater Poisek. He had shoulders, right? He was ordained. He got his rabbinic ordination from God. I don't know if any other rabbi got his rabbinical ordination from God. So Moshe, that I think that we all trust his psakim, Moshe issued a psak that for 38 years, there won't be Milah in all Am Yisrael because of this northern wind, the understanding was that it's dangerous to do Milah. And since it's not Gzeiras HaMalchus, it's not the Gentiles wanted to uproot the mitzvah, it was an objective medical reason, but that applied to all the people of Israel. That's why it's analogical to COVID, structurally analogical. And the decision was of Moshe Rabbeinu to postpone the Milah. And we know how Milah was important for Moshe. Moshe almost died because of Milah, because Tzipporah made the Milah and saved Moshe his life because God was upset that he wasn't doing Milah or whatever it is. So I'm sure that Moshe understood, even on a personal biographical level, the significance of Milah. And yet still, Moshe issued a psak, a valid psak that the Gemara supports, not to do Milah during all the 38 years. And therefore, in the beginning of Joshua, of Sefer Yehoshua, we read about a celebration, a very important event. Aseh lecha harvot surim. Yehoshua is commanded to make a certain knives, and in order to do a massive Milah before entering the land of Israel. Because here I'm just saying a parenthetical remark, there is a very direct link between the covenant of us Jews, the covenant of the land, and the covenant of the Milah. They're linked. So at any rate, we see here that we have a precedent. So let's put it this way. It's very clear, despite the fact that I showed how significant is the mitzvah of Milah, how much meaning it has, despite this fact, it is very clear that if it would have been clear-cut that there is even a safek pikuach nefesh of doing Milah in COVID time, if this medical data would have been validly established that it's a safek pikuach nefesh to do Milah during COVID, then I think that the halachic ruling is clear-cut that no Milah, even if COVID chas v'shalom would be 38 years. Needless to say, if we're talking about an era of 2 years, 1 year. So l'chora, the logic says, postpone the Milah if there's even the slightest risk. Here, I want to remind you something we spoke about 2 weeks ago. I said that what is the meaning of the word slightest? crossing a street as a regular practice. I'm not talking about COVID time. Just walking to shul, crossing the street, there is a tiny, tiny, tiny risk that I don't see a certain car or that is zooming and will run over me. No one will say that you shouldn't risk yourself in order to daven in shul. Therefore, don't cross the street. Okay, there is a certain threshold that one has to pass in order to define a situation as safek pikuach nefesh that will override the milah. Question is whether our situation with the COVID is in that already passes this threshold. Apparently, the doctor in New York that I told you about thought yes. The answer is yes. It's much more than crossing the street. What do you mean? There is at least a safek pikuach nefesh here, and therefore you should postpone the milah. Let's see further in the sources about the fact that when there is even a safek pikuach nefesh, one should postpone the milah. Let's read. The Rambam wrote, "Ein malin elav lat she'ein bo shum choli." We are doing milah only to a baby that has no illness, zero illness. Why? Because sakanat nefashot docha et hakol. Because pikuach nefesh b'chayvem overrides every commandment. Ve'efshar lamul la'achar zman. And also, okay, it is true that there is a special inyan and mitzvah to do it punkt on the 8th day, not earlier, of course, and not later. And if it falls on the 8th day, you do it even on Shabbos. However, if there is a pikuach nefesh in the 8th day, then you can definitely push it to a later time. Pikuach nefesh doche hakol, and it's possible to do the milah after time. And now the Rambam adds a sentence of his own that the Shulchan Aruch also copied. Ve'i efshar lachzir nefesh achat misrael le'olam. Yeah, it's all one sentence in Hebrew. You can do the milah after time, but if someone will be lost, that will be irreversible. Meaning the Rambam points out to us that when you pushed away the milah, that is reversible. So you won't do the milah on the 8th day, but you're still able to do the milah a week later. But if chas v'shalom, someone lost his life because of milah, there is no way to correct it. Okay. Now, I want to share with you, so the instructions that the rabbinate gave how to do milah at Corona time. Because as I told you, I showed you the two sides. The milah is something that we're really, really reluctant to postpone, and it's a very important mitzvah. On the other hand, it's very, very clear that when there is a safek pikuach nefesh, we should postpone it. And even for a long time, like 38 years. So now, let's look at the instructions. Excuse me, I made a mistake here. Let's look at the instructions of the that were given to the Moalim. These instructions were written by a very important Jew, Rabbi Professor Avraham Steinberg. Yeah, Rabbi Professor Avraham Steinberg. He got the Pras Israel. He's a big Talmud Chacham and a doctor. He wrote the encyclopedia, medical halachic encyclopedia, Encyclopedia Ilchatit L'Refuah. It's a masterpiece. It was translated to English. Now let's look at what are the instructions that he issued in order to do milah safely at the time of COVID. These instructions came out already back then when I was Purim Pesach time, but they were here. Let's look. Let's look at it. To all the Moalim, Shalom. look at the date here. The date is already July 2020, but that's an update, okay? So let's read the update. At the date of Zayin and Nisan, we sent you instructions, and now, and in Kafdal Tammuz, we made an update, and here is another update. Okay, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and therefore there is a need to make instructions for the health of the baby, the moel, and everyone who attends the bris. There is a committee, and here I'm giving the instructions. And look at instruction number 1, which is important. When the baby and his mom are healthy, with no evidence for having COVID or being in touch with such one, meaning bidud, or have no symptoms, meaning if the baby and his mom have no symptoms, have 0 symptoms, and are not chayav in quarantine, and there is no indication that they have corona, look at what he says here, and that's already right. Meaning, first of all, he says clearly, Rabbi Steinberg says clearly, that if there is no indication whatsoever for COVID around, there is no halachic justification to postpone the Milah. It doesn't enter any, it doesn't enter the zone of Safek Pikuach Nefesh at all. Now let's see what are the instructions. There is an obligation for the Moel to follow all the instructions of Misrad HaBriut, the health ministry. Especially should be very clean, very makbid on the cleanness of his hands. Of course, all the machshir should be stira, which should be always be makbid. You should wash your mouth with Listerine, which is probably to do with disinfect the mouth. To have a mask, and of course, it's recommended that they have a one-time a disposable sino. How do you say sino?
Sino, it's a pipe.
What?
Syringe, is it? Sino?
Sino. What he wears?
A pipette.
What?
A pipette.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, and it should be a disposable one, and it should be replaced every bris.
Yeah.
Of course, the people who attend the bris, it should be the minimum number, only the number that is allowed according to the Ministry of Health that time. So let's say if the bris, and I'll just translate it, this is not specific to bris. If the bris is in a closed space, so now it's allowed 10 people, I believe. If it's outdoors, then it's 20 people. And it should be a distance of 2 meters between every participant. Everyone that is approaching the baby or anyone else, the kfat or whatever, they should all have the same criteria. They should all be healthy, with no symptoms, with no quarantine obligation. They should all have masks. They should all wash their hands with alcohol gel and water and soap. Okay, the mole should have a maseicha, a mask that covers his mouth and nose. He should be 2 meters distance from anyone who is coming in contact before the bris, after bris, including when he gives instructions and answering questions. Okay, now look at 6. We got to the biggie. Chova levatzea metzitza b'chol brit. It is obligatory to do the practice of metzitza, sucking. It is obligatory, says Rabbi Steinberg. But at the time of the corona, you should do it only via a tube. shvoferet, a tube,
Tube.
a tube.
Syringe.
This instruction, says Rabbi Steinberg, that the metzitza should not be directly with the mouth. Here I need to explain. For years and years and years and generations, the way the metzitza was done and still is done regularly in a lot of circles is that the moel is actually with his mouth coming to the place of the wound and is sucking blood and then spits it. Okay? By the way, I'm almost positive that that's the way I was circumcised, meaning not a tube, but a direct. However, and I'll share it with you later, before COVID even, already for years, there is a big controversy, and some mohalim and rabbis hold that the sucking should be done via a tube, and others are very against it. When I'm saying a tube, I mean it's a tube that is open from both sides. It's a tube that causes vacuum, meaning it sits on there strongly, and you suck via the tube. Okay? What?
With the outside of a syringe. It's the barrel of a syringe is the best thing.
Okay. At any rate, there is an enormous controversy about this, whether some circles hold that it's very important that will still be done by the mouth, and some circles hold that no, it's better medically, and therefore that's why that is the way it should be, via the tube. That is an argument that was before the corona. Comes Rabbi Steinberg and says, no matter what is your opinion generally, at COVID time, the sucking should be done only via a tube. But look at how diplomatic he is. He says this instruction is valid only to the time of the COVID. Meaning once COVID is over, he doesn't want to tell people do it only via a tube. He's not putting himself in that big machloikes. He is saying, meaning those who are insisting to do it not via a tube, they could go ahead and continue to do it, but after COVID is over. As long as COVID is here, because of the big risk of the saliva of the moel causing, transmitting the virus to the baby, you should do it only via a tube. And he says, while doing the sucking with the tube, only then you should take your mask up, do the sucking, and then return it immediately back. Okay, a moel that is having corona, or there is a concern that he has corona, or that he was in touch with a corona, he should definitely not do any bris before he gets the ishur that he is healthy, etc., etc. Okay, a yoledet, a mother who gave delivery that was diagnosed as having corona, or there is a suspicion that she has corona, or that she's now chayav and bidud, and is now nursing the baby, or have a direct link with him, then you should postpone the brit till it's clear that the baby and the mother are healthy, because they can cause the moel problems. Okay, and he explains, if it turns out that they're healthy, they have an ishur from Misrad Abiyut, then you don't have to wait all the 7 days after completing the bidud. If the baby had a test on the 8th day and he was found on negative and there is no symptoms, you could do the milah on time. Okay. So I think we got the instructions, we got the spirit of the instructions very, very clear. Okay. And then now, what I want to, our shir is 10:45 till 12, right? Am I correct? No, it's 10:30 till 11:45. Yeah, got it. Okay, good. So we will focus now on the big debate regarding mitzitza, regarding the sucking. We'll explain what it is, why is it done, what is the big controversy about it, and the opinions regarding it, medically and halachically. And then, of course, I've started with you from the bottom line that Rabbi Steinberg gives here instructions. No matter what is your opinion regarding mitzitza, only at COVID time, I instruct to do it via a tube. After COVID, each one will continue with his own custom. Okay, understanding. Now let's look a little bit about this stage in Mila that is called mitzitza, sucking. We know that when you do Mila, you cut, and then you do what we call priya. You are folding. You're folding the skin. Yeah, after cutting, the mole folds, and then he sucks. Now, where is this sucking came from? So let's read the Mishnah in Masechet Shabbos. Okay, let's read it. Osin kol tzorchei milah b'Shabbos. You're doing all the needs of Mila are done in Shabbos, even if they require a violation of Shabbos. Yeah, if it's the 8th day. So we are doing all the needs of Mila on Shabbos. We are cutting, we are folding, as I said, mohalin, uforin, umotzetzin. You see, it's mamash included, all the three together. It seems as if it's part of the action. Part of the action of the Mila. I'm not saying now that that's the bottom line. I'm just analyzing with you the text. It's written here. You do all the needs of Mila. You cut, you fold, and you suck, and you put on top of the wound ispelanit vekamon. Ispelanit is a certain bandage. Kamon is a certain spice, like a certain powder, whatever it is. Tachlis kamon is a spice, but for us, it's like a powder. So now you could say, Avi Kannai, let's analyze the text. We have here 4 components that it says that are under the title of Tzorchei Mila, the needs of Mila, that are done in Shabbos. A, the Mila itself. B, the folding of the skin. 3, the sucking. 4, putting the bandage. Now I'm asking you, is putting the bandage, I'll go with the 4th one, is putting the bandage considered part of the Maisa HaMila, part of the action of the Mila? Putting the bandage, is that part of the Maisa HaMila? When I will describe to someone, what is the halachic definition of doing Mila? Is putting the bandage part of that definition? The answer is clear, yes. Not everyone together. Is putting a bandage part of the action of the definition of an action, conceptual definition of essential definition of the Maisa Mila, action of Mila? No, there's no Biden or Trump. There's a clear-cut answer.
No.
Yes, Paul. What?
No.
No, it's a flat no. Putting a bandage is an action that I do in order to heal a wound. And of course, it is defined. Look at the Mishnah. Look at the text. The Mishnah says, one is doing on Shabbos all the needs of Mila. You cut, you fold, you suck, and you put a bandage and the powder. It is definitely allowed to do on Shabbos, because it's part of the needs of Mila, Tzorchei Mila. But this is not an integral part of the action of Mila. The action of Mila is the Mila. After there was a Mila, I put a bandage on the wound. So what do I want to illustrate? What is the point I want to illustrate here? Let's analyze the text again, like Lamdanim. Okay, not like. All of the people here are Lamdanim. So let's analyze the text. You do all the needs of Mila and Shabbos. The first example, Mohalin. Is that the action of Mila? Of course, yes. That's a flat yes. The fourth thing, you put a bandage on it. Is that a part of the Mila? That's a flat no. We have two things, two components in between, the folding and the sucking. So here's the question. Is the folding and the sucking indeed an integral part of the action of Mila? That's part of the definition, the conceptual definition of Mila, or it's just like the bandage, a thing that I do after the Mila, and it's part of the needs of Mila. So here, and is the answer the same both for Priya and for Mitzitza? Maybe Priya is part of the action of Mila. Cutting and folding is part of the definition of the action of Mila, but perhaps sucking is not part of the action of Mila, but rather it's more similar to putting a bandage. Let's see. So the Mishnah says, and the Shulchan Aruch rules it, halacha l'maaseh, that's a text of a Mishnah, mal velo para ki'ilu lo mal. Yeah, this is a Mishnah and was ruled halacha l'maaseh in the Shulchan Aruch. If one did the cutting and didn't do the folding, the para, the priya, by the way, I'm just asking, is there a better translation for the term priya? I'm just saying folding the skin after the cutting.
Exposing?
Yeah. What?
Exposing the...
Could be. Priya. Yeah, I'm poreh. It's like lifroa et ha'se'ar. You know, it's you're not like unwrapping. Yeah, something like that. So it's folding the skin. I assume we all understand basically what I'm talking about. I'm not a moel myself, but the text of the Mishnah and the Shulchan Aruch rules it, mamash, word by word rules the Mishnah, the Shulchan Aruch halacha l'maaseh, mal velo para ki'ilu lo mal. If one made the cutting without the priya, without the folding, it's as if he didn't do circumcision. What do we see from here? That priya is definitely an integral. It's not like putting a bandage. Here, I'll give you the analogy. Could you imagine a text saying, and of course this text doesn't appear anywhere, if one made a mila and a priya, if one made a mila and a priya and a folding, but he didn't put a bandage, it's as if the mila is not valid? Can you imagine such a halacha? It's false. Of course, if a moel did a mila and did a priya, but didn't put a bandage, I hate this moel, okay? But the Jew, the baby, is considered mahul. The mila is valid. However, if a moel cut and didn't do priya, this baby is still an arel. He is not considered, this is not a valid mila, halachically. You understand the difference? So we see clearly that in that list of doing all the needs of Mila on Shabbos, and it says, Mila, Mohalin, Porin, Motzitzin, Venotnim, Ispelanit. You clearly see that they're not all the four in the same status. If one didn't do Mila, then there's no Mila. If one didn't do Priya, there is no Mila. However, if one didn't put a bandage, then he's still a Jew. He's still a Nemo. He's a Jew anyhow. Now the million-dollar question is, what is the status of the sucking? does it go with the first three? Just like mal velo para ki'ilu lo mal, the same mal velo matzatz ki'ilu lo mal, or no, the metzitza is like the bandage.
Yeah.
What do you say?
Like the bandage.
What is the basis for your answer? That it's like the bandage? Aside from fantastic intuition?
It's safety. It's because the baby is still nimal even if the sister was forgotten or not done properly, I think.
Okay. Any other opinion?
And priya means, my understanding of priya is disruption. So they've destroyed that bit of skin, the foreskin. So that's obviously part of it. And the latter two are clearly extra.
Okay. So there is a certain consensus here. I didn't hear any other opinion.
Well, here's one other opinion.
What?
I'll give another opinion. The logic would say that both the Mila and the Priya deal with the orla, are all related to the skin, whereas the Metzitza has nothing to do with the skin, it's just the blood. So there is a somewhat differentiation between the two and the Metzitza.
So you're actually not saying a different opinion, you're saying a different reason for the same opinion, that you will group. So here I'll give you a counter argument, stam intuitively, okay? The bandage is something totally external to the whole thing. However, in all the first three, the cutting, the unwrapping, and the sucking, it's all still has a direct contact, okay, with a place. However, this is all theoretical. This is all theoretical. Let's see what our sources are saying. The sources, please.
I'm gonna run to the two. Hopefully, these are.
1 second. Okay, just please turn off the background noises. So the sources are very clear. The sources, whereas we have such a text, mal velo para ki'ilu lo mal, Shulchan Aruch rules it, right? One who didn't do priya, it's as if the mila is not valid, right? We don't have such a text regarding metzitza. There is nowhere ever a halacha, a mishnah and a halacha that says mal velo matzatz ki'ilu lo mal. We have no such a statement. Mal velo matzatz ki'ilu lo mal. Therefore, we understand, as y'all said correctly, that there is a distinction between the first two and the last two. The first two are me'akev in the mila. If one doesn't do it, then b'di'evid, the mila is not valid. If one didn't cut or he didn't wrap. However, if one didn't suck, the mila is still valid because no one told us differently regarding priya. It was said explicitly regarding priya that if one doesn't do priya, then the mila is not valid. Okay. Now it was said that perhaps the reason for the metzitza is pretty similar to the bandage, meaning a sakana for medical reasons. So let's see that. First of all, let's see a description of the mila by the Rambam. Keitzad mu'alin. חותכים את כל האור המחפה את העטרה עד שתתגלה כל העטרה, ואחר כך פורעים את הקרום הרך שלמטה מן האור בציפורן, ומחזירו לכאן ולכאן. Yeah, you're cutting the skin that is covering the pin till it is exposed, and then you should all the layer that was under the skin, you should fold it so that the skin of the pin will be shown, exposed. And then he says, after the priya, you are sucking the mila. By the way, he doesn't explain how you do it. Mouth, not mouth, but you're sucking the mila till the blood will get out from all the distant places. Meaning it seems that you should suck hard, like to really lishov. How do you say lishov? Pump. Dwell. Yeah, the blood from all the distant places. But here it's written why. And here's the important clause. Kedei shelo yavo lidei sakana. The understanding is that the sucking is to avoid a danger. That is the purpose of it. The kol mi sheino motzetz, and anyone who dares not to do the sucking, ma'avirin oto, we fire him. V'achar, we don't let him to be a mole. And after he sucks, then you should put on it a bandage. Now, the basis for the Rambam saying that one who is not makbid on mitzitza, we are firing him, is the Gemara in Shabbos. Rav Papa says, this moel that doesn't do a mitzitza, it's a sakana, and we fire him. Now there is a big chakira. Okay. Here's some history, because I see also the time is running, but it's okay. I'll share with you the information orally, and we'll see. The discussion about, first of all, there's a question. What is that sakana that the sages were talking about that the metzitza avoids? They had some medical idea about it, and it's not clear for us. We do know that intuitively, I know that when I get a cut, definitely as a kid, that's an instinct. When I get a cut, what do? Many times, I don't think it's only me, or I used to do. You're in order to avoid some pain and others, we're sucking it. And it is true that the saliva has a certain element that has some medical benefits. I read about it, the saliva. And that's why that instinct exists, that when people have cuts, they're sucking. So is that what the Gemara was talking about? I can tell you that Rabbi Dr. Halperin, Mordechai, who is a serious doctor and a serious rabbi, he wrote an article about the riddle of the Metzitza, and he there claims that the Metzitza has a medical benefit. He's strongly claiming it, that for what's called hypoxia, there is a certain percentage of babies that after cutting, then the oakim, the veins, that's the word. Marcel, unmute yourself. Marcel, unmute yourself.
Arteries.
The arteries. Little arteries.
They could there could be a block there.
We spasm.
And there could be a block there that's called hypoxia, and then the hypoxia means that there won't be enough oxygen to the end of the pin, and then and when you, right after the procedure, when you suck it, you are minimizing that risk for hypoxia. That's the solution of Rabbi Halperin to the riddle of Metzitza. What happened is that 170 years ago, and for many, many years, starting from 170 years ago by a student, Rabbi Elazar Horvitz, the rabbi of Vienna, who was a student of the Khatam Sofer, they raised up the issue that actually, A, we don't understand what is the medical advantage of the Mitzitza. That's against what Rabbi Halperin claims, meaning for years, the notion was that it's a riddle of Chazal, but we have no clue what is the medical advantage. That's on the one hand. And on the other hand, we definitely do think that it's not healthy to do Mitzitza, because the minute that we know more about how to be sterile, and in every chirurgical procedure, just imagine a doctor starting to use his mouth directly with a wound. That seems increasing the chances for infection. And indeed, now I'm jumping in the tunnel time. In New York, as some of you know, there was a big time debate about this thing, about doctors and everything. And the claim was that there were some cases of babies that passed away because of herpes. And the claim was that the herpes was caused because of the Mitzitza. And therefore, there was a big demand to stop the Mitzitza, or at least do it via the tube. Okay? And here, so that is really the topic. The Chassam Sofer answered the rabbi from Vienna and told him that, and he answered him urgently, like 3 days after the letter arrived. And he told him, there is no need to do the Mitzitza with the mouth. If it is dangerous, definitely one should do it with a tube. That was the Chassam Sofer. The Briskers, that you all know that were very, very careful with Pikuach Nefesh, the Briskers went even a step, but that's really a minority opinion. They went even a step further. They said, we're willing to give up the Mitzitza altogether. Okay? Now, and the other camp, which is a very strong camp, says, what do you mean? We're doing the Mitzitza, and we're not doing it with a tube. We're doing it with a mouth, like it was done in all generations. So these are really if you ask, the three opinions. Now, but there is a very important Hakira here, a conceptual one, that I didn't mention. I went till now, all the discussion went with the flow that Marcel said that it's based on the Gemara and the Rambam, that the whole purpose of the Mitzitza is because of avoiding danger. And then, of course, you enter all the big questions. When there is a contradiction between our medical knowledge and the sage's medical knowledge. So, will I say nature changed? As some rabbis try to resolve that conflict here. Nishtanu hatvaim. Yeah, the nature changed. Or to say, no, the sages only said it as a medical advice, and therefore they themselves would have said today, not do it, only do it via a tube. Or you say, no, the sages here said that there is a sakana. That's Rabbi Halperin. And the fact that you don't know what is the sakana, that doesn't seem, Rabbi Halperin says, even from a medical, from a scientific point of view, if you have ancient sources that something is a sakana, the fact that you didn't find it yet, that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. So you can't just dismiss here the ruling of the sages. On the other hand, of course, so he also tried to find what is this sakana. Okay, on the other hand, if clearly it's dangers, their advice is endangering the baby, you can't ignore that too, halachically. So this is all when we speak about in that framework. However, there was a group of rabbis that claimed that despite the fact that the Gemara and the Rambam present the Mitzitza as something that is merely done because of sakana, but is not part of the action of Mila, conceptually, as I also proved to you from the fact that it doesn't say mal velo matzatz ki ilu lo mal. Okay, one who made a milah without a mitzitza, the milah is not valid. Some claim, look, it is true that as opposed to the priya, the mitzitza, mal velo matzatz, the milah is still valid, but the avid. However, the chatchila, the mitzitza is not done only because of sakana. It's true that that's the explicit reason that is written in the Gemara and in the Rambam, but the mitzitza is actually an integral part of the milah. Therefore, one cannot give it up as a ruling. Okay, let's see some of the sources and then we'll wrap up. Yeah. Look at the Orach Chaim on the Torah. One has to do three things in the milah, and that is milah, priya, and mitzitza. You see, he lists them all the three at one. He doesn't mention here and to put a bandage. Okay, this is not mentioned here, and we understand why. Because he sees the mitzitza as part of the thing, of the action. Milah is krita sa'orla. Priya is that you split the skin to two sides. Yeah, fold it. Mitzitza is the infected blood. And you're supposed to suck this thing because this is also bechinas orla. So you see that the Orach Chaim clearly understood it's part of the action of the milah. And also in the famous piyut that we all say in Birkas Hamazon at the end of the milah, Harachamanu ivarechet hamal besara orla. That's the rachamaning we had in Birkat Hamazon. Ufara umatzat tmei hamila. Isha yarev rach lavav v'dotop sula. Im shlosh ele lo yasela. Says avodatop sula. It's disqualified if he doesn't do all of these three things. Of course, the bandage is not mentioned here. And yet still, okay, now I'm skipping the question of the Chassam Sofer and his answer. It's unfortunate. Okay, but the Chassam Sofer is saying, of course, if there's a sakana, you can definitely do the mitzitza, not in the mouth. You could do it in another thing. And it's clearly. Now, by the way, what is the other thing that we recommended? Not tube. The tube is a much later. The tube with the vacuum is a much later invention. Look at that. The Chassam Sofer agreed that instead of sucking with the mouth, one would put a sponge and will just suck the blood via a sponge. Not really suck. We'll push and try to absorb as much as he can. As Rabbi Shurvai says, I highly doubt that counts as mitzitza. The Rambam says clearly that the mitzitza is in order to suck the distant blood, harechokim. So the Chassam Sofer and all the rest that allowed the sponge, they were even much more lenient. But the tube is not problematic from that point of view. Now, let's see the student of the Chassam Sofer was strongly against sucking with a tube. He says, what do you mean? There was never a danger. And the Chassam Sofer, my Rabbi, gave the answer only based on a certain case. Wow. The Maram Sheik and the Mari Asad and other rabbis claim that the mitzitza, listen to that, is halacha l'Moshe miSinai. So look at that. We said it's because sakana. They say it's halacha l'Moshe miSinai. Rabbi Shurvai says this is not pshat, with all the respect. The respect is that it's sakana, and it's not halacha l'Moshe miSinai. That is the pshat. I'm almost done. Yeah. As he says, Rov dolei achronim katvu meforasho deina mitzitza ela mishum manias sakana, and he quotes here a lot of doilim. And he brings a proof from one of the Rishonim that says the Metzitza is not a hefsek regarding bracha. And why? Because it's sorchei mila, like benching. Says, what do you mean? If it's mamish part of the Maisa Mila, of course it's not a hefsek. Okay, we're jumping in our tunnel time. There are all kinds of camps against and not against.
Can I ask a question?
The most what?
I'd like to ask a question. Does Metzitza mean blood has to enter the mouth of the moel? Or is if you use a tube, you just get it into the tube and that's it?
I think the tube is with a vacuum, strong vacuum. I assume it does reach the mouth, but I didn't go into that detail.
It doesn't go into the mouth.
What?
You wouldn't want to get into your mouth. You put cotton wool between,
Okay.
so it doesn't go into your mouth. That's the last thing you want.
All right. Thank you. At any rate, here's the extreme example that Rabbi Herschel Schechter, Tzvi Herschel Schechter, is quoting Rav Soloveitchik. Dat Rabbeinu aitab de bezman hazeh ein tzarich metzitza klal. That's the most extreme. And once a Moel wanted to do it, and Rav Soloveitchik asked him not to do it, and when the Moel begged him to do it, he said that my father wouldn't let you, but I am more tolerant, so I let you do the metzitza. But that's an extreme opinion. Now, I will, and just that there is, according to Kabbalah, I don't want to read it inside. According to Kabbalah, the metzitza with the mouth is important. Dafka with the mouth, according to Kabbalah. But as the Chassam Sofer says and Rav Osher follows him, we don't rule in this case according to Kabbalah. Yet still Rav Osher is leaning to doing with the mouth because he thinks it's not dangerous and most rabbis do it. At any rate, in terms of the Kabbalah, they're saying that there is an inyan with peh. Mila begimatria is peh, and peh begimatria is elokim. All kinds of secrets. Now, what I told you about post-truth, and that's mamash the last minute, I read an article by a rabbi in Tchumen. And the article by the Rav in Tchumen is strongly saying that one should do it with a tube and not with a mouth. And I'm speaking about an article that was printed prior to COVID time. Because of infection and all of this, because of the danger of herpes, one should do it with a tube. And he's very strong about it. And I read another article of a modern rabbi that is strongly supporting sucking with a mouth. And he says that there is no evidence for danger, no evidence for herpes, no evidence for this. So here, that's what I'm telling you, that there is, you have here the camps. Oh, another important thing, it's good that I didn't forget it. We can't deny that there was also an influence here about the battle against the reforms.
Against what?
The reform Jewry.
Oh.
Reform Jewry attacked the Metzitza, of course. And once they attacked it,
Made it kosher.
then of course the Maram Shik and a lot of rabbis in Europe, they felt that it's a battle and I must defend the sucking with the mouth. Okay? Now, even nowadays, there was an article in Haaretz that I read 2012, published in 2012, and it quotes there an important moel that says, look, I'm very concerned about nullifying sucking with the mouth and saying, no, now everybody with a tube. He says, because I know that some of the claims of the people that they're presenting their claims at out of the considerations of the, how do you say, the tovat hayeled, the goodness, the welfare, the interest of the child, of the baby. Well, that's a slippery slope. I know that what they really want, there are so many websites today already and not only websites, I know it. I met people that are making propaganda. I'm telling you about Israelis here. They're not a lot, but they're propaganda against Mila. They claim Mila is barbarian, Mila is dangerous, and they try to convince not to do Mila. And the argument is the Tovat HaYeled, the baby's right and the baby's interest. So he says, it's just a stage. And that's the point. So that's an argument. And now I'll give you the same argument, but on the flip side that I saw. The rabbi in Tchumen writes, because we're so much attacked about the Mila, so let's do it in order to defend it. Let's do it in the most sterile way. Dafka that will defend us from the attacks. One sees it as a slippery slope because he knows that sometimes, and I think he's right, the people who are arguing against the Metzitza, some of them it's really part of a big argument against the Mila at all. But on the other hand, the other one will say, well, the way is Dafka to do it with the tube. So I just presented here the opinion. And as I've shown you what Rabbi Steinberg was preaching for, was instructing for, that he didn't want to get into this big halachic political debate. He didn't go into it, but he said in COVID time, but he said this instruction is valid only for COVID time. He added that clause. One should do it with the tube, and this anchaya, this instruction is relevant only for COVID time. Okay? Tov Chaverim, it was a pleasure, and have a great Shabbos.
אוקיי, שבת שלום, אנחנו סיימנו.
Shabbat shalom to everybody.
Shabbat shalom, סיימנו.
כל טוב.